So, the Dark Ages, what were they? Historians have traditionally looked at the time between 500 CE and 1000 CE as the Dark Ages, because during this time period, not much advancement occurred in Europe. It wasn't so much that things didn't advance, but there were no great empires like Rome during this time period. At the same time, the technological and social changes were quite small. However, calling it the not quite as interesting as Rome, but still decent ages, well, doesn't quite have the same ring as calling it the Dark Ages. Hey, look who's here today. Natalie, come on in. So, Natalie, what do you know about the Dark Ages?
Well, wasn't that a period when, people weren't really getting out much?
People weren't really getting out much. Good answer. Anything else you have for us today?
Nah.
Okay, well, we'll see more about this when we talk about the Dark Ages later on. Thank you. To some, the Dark Ages look like this.
You're really into computers, huh?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Dialing into the school's computer.
While to others, maybe they think of this. So earlier we saw Natalie, and now look at this. Miss Baltimore's here. Hi, Miss Baltimore.
Hello, one second. No, I can't make that performance. I have some teaching job. I'll call you back. We'll talk about it over tea. Oh, yes. Okay, bye-bye. Yeah.
So, Miss Baltimore.
Yes.
Today we're talking about the Dark Ages. What do you know about the Dark Ages?
Well, I don't know.
You don't know.
I mean, I remember, history class, and I remember, drinking tea. No, the Dark Ages, it wasn't really important. What's important is, that Kim Kardashian, she wears dark makeup, and, Kanye is like the Dark Knight, And, Kanye is like the Dark Knight, that's what I know.
Okay, well, I think we've heard enough from Miss Baltimore now, so we'll go let her.
I mean, if you need me, just call me.
Okay.
I have a lot of important things, but for you, I'll make a point. We'll have tea.
Great.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
All right, no problem.
So, anyway, let's now go on to the Dark Ages. The term, the Dark Ages, really only refers to Europe. We'll see why in a few minutes, but the rest of the world was doing okay. What caused the Dark Ages? Simply the fall of Rome. Without the Roman Empire, the political relationships and vast trade network that was existing in Europe collapsed, leaving poverty and chaos behind. With the fall of Rome, there was no longer one man ruling the lands of Europe. Many tried to step into that role, ensuring warfare and death across Western Europe. Also, due to the lack of a central authority and the constant struggle between societies, outside groups were able to attack fairly easily. The Vikings attacked from the lands of the north, leading invasions throughout the British Isles, the coast of France, and even traveling up the rivers into Central Europe. Meanwhile, Islamic forces traveled across northern Africa and into the Iberian Peninsula before venturing into what is modern-day France. There was a moment when Justinian, the Byzantine emperor, remember the Byzantine Empire, that's the eastern half of the old Roman Empire? He made an effort to reconquer the western half of the old Roman Empire. His goal was to reestablish the might, the power of Rome. This might have worked except at the same time there was an outbreak of bubonic plague. We'll come back to the plague later on. It's a really cool subject. This disease killed tens of millions of people across Europe, ending the efforts of Justinian and virtually ensuring that Europe would struggle for centuries to come. The one unifying factor during this entire time period, however, was Christianity. The religion continued to gain followers across Europe. This will be even more evident in the next few lessons. In the Middle East, there was progress. As you already saw from the John Green video, during the Dark Ages, the lands of the Middle East flourished. There was progress in medicine, science, mathematics, and art. With the unifying force of their religion, Islam, they were able to not only focus on these intellectual areas, but also to expand across Africa and into Europe. You'll see about that expansion into Europe in tomorrow's lesson. It's a good one. Now, on to China. Briefly, between 581 and 617 CE, the Sui dynasty took control of China and brought it back to a glory similar to that of the Qin dynasty. The Sui did not retain control as they were very harsh to their people, making many demands upon them, including compulsory work and very large taxes. These resources, however, were used to start work on the Grand Canal and to repair the Great Wall. The Sui fought wars against the people of Korea in an attempt to conquer them and add them to China. But these wars ended very badly for China, and the result was the Sui dynasty found themselves facing revolts from the people, and eventually they were assassinated. The Grand Canal is the largest man-made waterway in the world, stretching over 1,103 miles. This allowed trade to occur between peoples across a broad area within China. After the Sui, the Tang dynasty arrived in China from 618 to 907 CE, and they are often thought of by historians as the high point of Chinese civilization, equal or greater to the Han dynasty. Through contact with India and the Middle East, creativity expanded. Buddhism spread across China and became a central part of their culture. During the same time period, block printing was developed, 500 years before Gutenberg would create his printing press in Europe. During this time, a new class of citizen evolved, the educated government worker. Using Confucian teachings, tests were developed to ensure that government workers were literate and educated. This was done to ensure that the best people worked in government. These men were not royalty or governors of territories, but civil workers who were not corrupt and helped the nation prosper. Near the end of the Tang dynasty, foreign invaders attacked the nation, dividing it into multiple kingdoms. The Song dynasty completed the work of the Sui and the Tang on the Grand Canal, including the development of locks, which allowed boats to move uphill. How's that, you ask? Well, here's a quick explanation of what a lock is. In the canal system, a boat sails forward into what is known as a lock. A lock is a holding place for a boat. Once a boat is inside the lock, gates are closed behind the boat. Water is then added or taken away to raise or lower the boat. When the boat is at the proper level, gates at the front of the lock are open and the boat then sails through. It is now either higher or lower than it was originally. This process is then repeated until the boat reaches the elevation it needs to be at, essentially a staircase for a boat. The Song Emperor continued to appoint officials to run areas of the country and used workers who took tests, much like in previous dynasties. The result was far more control in the hands of the emperor and those who reported to him. Inland and sea-based trade increased along with industry. Printing and education allowed for the development of classes of educated people, and a middle class was created from the artisans and businessmen of China. The completion of the canal linked large areas of the nation, allowing those who didn't own large sections of land or work for the government to still become successful and gain wealth through trade. Now, let's hop across the water there and talk about Japan. In the years between 300 CE and 538 CE, Japan was finally united into one large country. In the same time period, Buddhism reached Japan. During the 700 CE, China's influence started to fade. It was at this time that a Japanese alphabet started to evolve from the Chinese alphabet, giving Japan its own language and its own alphabet. This allowed for the creation of Japanese literature. The government of that time in Japan, though, was still kind of harsh and was learning how to kind of run the country. They increased taxes on the people, but exempted monasteries and government officials. This left many poor farmers paying all the taxes. When they couldn't pay their taxes, they would then lose their land. The result was many poor farmers who couldn't pay taxes losing their land to government officials who would buy the land. The problem there is government officials pay no taxes. So the government saw a decrease in tax revenue, leading to less money for the government. In the end, the country started to break down into feudal territories where local rulers hired trained warriors known as samurai to defend their lands. We will learn more about the samurai in a future lesson. Briefly, back to India. In the years of the Dark Ages, the Indian subcontinent continued to gain wealth and knowledge through trade with China, Europe, and the Middle East. While new dynasties continued to emerge and rule India, India itself continued to evolve and grow in the arts and sciences. Lastly, in the Americas. Part of the issue in the Americas was geography and how it worked against those who lived there. Due to the north-south relationship between the two continents, it's very difficult to establish trade between these areas. A potato grown in the Andes cannot be sent and shipped through the rainforest of Brazil into Central America and from there to a Native American living in, say, Virginia. It won't survive the trip. The other problem is, of course, there are no pack animals in that time period. There are no horses, there are no oxen. Aside from the llama, who do quite well in the Andes, but don't do very well in the rainforest or jungle, it's kind of hard to transport things. So this creates localized trade areas and trade networks with small exposure to other nations. Each region, though, had its own society and its own advances. High in the Andes Mountains, the Inca built the great city of Machu Picchu. The city featured running water and was crafted from large pieces of stone which were set without using mortar or cement. Now, centuries later, Machu Picchu still stands. In Central America and parts of Mexico, we have the Maya. They were known to have the only fully developed written language in the Americas. Between 240 and 900 CE, the Mayan culture thrived and advanced, building many cities and large palaces and temples throughout their area. They had trade routes established with the nations to the north and south of them, and traded items such as gold, salt, cacao, jade, and obsidian. The Mayan society started to decline and then went into a full collapse. Historians are not sure these days what the actual cause was for the collapse of the Mayan civilization, but there are two theories. The first is that it was ecological, a drought, famine, some sort of localized climate change. The second one is it was non-ecological. They were overpopulated. They had a foreign invasion or an internal revolt by the people causing the government to collapse, and their society fell apart after that. And finally, onto the Hopewell in North America. We talked before about how the Hopewell built large earthen mounds using baskets full of dirt and rocks to create these mounded cities. The Hopewell were able to create these large structures without the use of metal tools, largely due to a lack of easily accessible metal deposits in the area, and therefore they had no knowledge of how to work metal. Things like gold or silver, even if you have it, will not dig very well. It's too soft and malleable. In the 500 CE, during the Dark Ages, the Hopewell had a collapse much like the Mayan. Again, historians are not sure why it happened or how it happened. All we know is the Hopewell civilization faded and turned then into a series of other smaller tribal groups, which continued on throughout North America. Wow, that was a lot. We had a student, we had a teacher, we covered pretty much the whole planet, and meanwhile, we'll see tomorrow in class what impacts the Dark Ages had on Europe. So as always, be proud of who you are, and I'll see you next time.